Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everybody. It's Paula Edgar, your host of Branding Room Only, and I am so excited for my guest today. Introducing Desiree Ralls-Morrison, who is the Executive Global Chief Legal Officer at McDonald's Corporation. In her role, Desiree oversees the company's global legal operations and is responsible for supporting the company's strategies, anticipating and managing risk, and advancing McDonald's brand and values. She also advises both the board of directors and the CEO. Desiree is also a founding member of the new Commonwealth Racial Equity and Social Justice Fund, NCF, which is curated as a funding and support resource for Black, Latino, and Indigenous entrepreneurs, investors, and nonprofits. Desiree, welcome to the Branding Room.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So I start out by asking everybody the same thing. What does personal brand mean to you? How do you define it?
Yeah, really, to me, it's what do you represent? What do you stand for? Kind of what do people think about when they think of you? Mm-hmm. That's sort of how I think about personal brand.
Absolutely. So speaking of your own, how would you describe yourself in 3 words or short phrases?
So this is hard. I would say for sure, integrity. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm someone who's believes, that I'm honest. I have a really strong moral compass and principles. So I would say that's number one. The second, I would say authentic. Mm-hmm. So, I'm really an open book almost about anything, whether it's sort of, how I think about diversity and how I think about it in my current role or in my prior roles, how I managed a professional career and, raising 2 children, and being a wife, whether it's, helping, as a new GC, helping my mom to transition after she fell ill. So I'm really authentic and very comfortable sort of sharing my true self, including kind of vulnerabilities and fears and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I think the third one really is around having high standards. I really care about quality. I really care about excellence. And so, again, I grew up believing that I could do and be anything. And I try to exude that. But I also expect, I don't expect anything of myself that I don't also expect of, my team, my children, and others. So, I care about excellence. And I would say that's part of who I am.
Oh, I love that. So when I talk about branding as a concept, I talk about 5 pieces, but the piece that I try to really get to folks is excellence, right? You're always striving for it, which is different than perfection, right? Like you can't meet perfection, but you can always strive for excellence. So I love that you included that in there. Right. Yay, that makes me happy. So do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you use in life?
I do. And it gets to that first quality about myself. And so it's something my mom would always say to me and my brother. It's never right to do wrong. And I actually have it tattooed on my arm as a reminder, but it's definitely something that I live by. And I mean, at the core, what it means is it is about integrity, right? Sometimes, we try to talk ourselves into rationalizing doing something that at our core we really know is not the right thing. Yeah. And it might feel right because we've managed to talk ourselves into it. But that quote is always a reminder to me, no matter what, it's never right to do wrong.
I love it. I love that you have it tattooed. I'm going to start asking questions to everybody who I interview, because I have learned so many people have tattoos that I had no idea. Tattoos. I love that. So my mother used to always say, you can be the wind or you can be the leaf. Yeah. Essentially, you can get there, hopefully, or you can get there by making sure it's part of your intention. And it's how I live and internalize the excellence piece of all that I do. So I love that. We have that mama's quotes in our
It's so funny because, you hear them growing up and, I'm sure my mom always thought it would go in one ear and out the other, and it probably did a little bit, but, it really truly resonated with me. And it wasn't just something that she said to me growing up. It's something that I actually live by personally and professionally. And so, it sounds like the same for you, but it really does just underscore how powerful, one, our mothers are, but two, these little nuggets that they probably don't realize, how important they are, how they're really, they're really taking hold within who we are as people and at our core, but they really are.
They are. They're sitting there. I remember there was a quiz that my son did when he was like, I think maybe in second grade. And it was a fill in the blank. What's something your mother always says? And he misspelled it, but it was a big word, accountability. I was like, that's exactly right. I felt very proud. I'm like, he's listening to something, even if he doesn't get it, but I love that. So I ask all of my guests if they have a hype song, and it's either a song that when they're going to get full Desiree, it's playing in your head when you're walking in, or if you're having a bad day, you play this to get yourself out of that. What is it for you? And it could be one or two different songs.
Yeah, I would say a little bit, it depends on the mood, but for the most part, I'm Every Woman is definitely a hype song for me. I mean, one, I do think that I very much represent not just every woman, but like I'm a pretty normal person. I've been blessed. I've had some great things happen to me over the course of my life, but I'm very, very normal. And so I feel like that's a perfect song for me, but also because if you really listen to the words of that song, it's that you're adaptable. You can pretty much do it all. You can do everything. And, we struggle a lot with doing everything at the same time, but I absolutely believe that there's nothing that we can't do. And so that song always just gets me excited and empowered and helps me to remember sort of who I am.
I love that. And it's funny when I ask people about this, all the time, people smile when they're talking about the song. Like it literally is hyping them up in their mood. And I love that. All right. So tell me, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? And how did that shape you?
Sure. So I grew up in a town in Connecticut called North Stonington. Oh. It's a really small town. It's near Stonington, Connecticut, which some people might know. It's near Mystic, which people, depending on your age, might know from Mystic Pizza. But it's a really small town, and I would say that's where I spent the bulk of my years growing up. It was a town that was completely white. At the time, my family was the only Black family in town. I was the only Black student in my school because my brother is 6 years younger than me. And so we were never even in the same school at the same time. But it really taught me a lot of different things. I would say, first of all, my parents moved there because it was the best education that they could afford. When they bought this house, it was a house that was in foreclosure. My mom worked at the bank. It was in a great neighborhood with great schools. And, they couldn't afford a private school, but they wanted to give us the best education they could. And that was how they did that. But then we drove actually to another state, only about like 15 minutes away, but to go to church because they wanted to make sure that we went to a Black church and always knew, despite the fact that we lived in this white town, that we were Black and, that we knew who we were, that we, worshiped with people like us, but that we could navigate a world where we were getting a really good education and could swim in those lanes, but that we also could swim in the lanes where we, really felt at home. So that was really important to them. And then I guess I would say, what that experience, taught me, besides the fact that, education is kind of key to how we get to how we move up in this world and how we kind of navigate socially. And, besides, sort of the recognition and understanding of how important it is to know who you really are and to be and socialize with people who you connect with and who are like you. But it also got me very comfortable with being in those spaces of being the only one. right? And this is from a very young age, right? Getting used to being talked about in a negative way for no reason, being used to, racism. Like I remember our school was in two different buildings and walking from one building to the next, having, spitballs, spat at me and being called the N-word and stuff like that, and being the only one in that situation. It got me used to the assumptions that people make about your limitations, right? And it got me comfortable with the fact that recognition is not always based on merit. And, and the best and the smartest students might not, in my case, I wasn't the right color. And, so when the rewards and the recognition and the scholarships and all that came out, I realized, what, it's not always about merit. And so there were some real life lessons that it's hard when you are in junior high school and high school and you don't necessarily see it, but it certainly played a big part in developing me into the person that I am and really understanding corporate America as well as, just the world that we live in generally.
Yeah, I mean, I went to boarding school in Massachusetts. And so I always say that New England has some Southern flavor to it sometimes. and being a kid from New York City, I was used to being around people who look like everything, and then going and being one of 20 something kids. That was a very interesting space to be in, and particularly socioeconomically, where it was like I had no idea what insert brand here was because my parents would buy me whatever fit from whatever place was cheapest. That's what I was wearing. So that totally resonates for me for the lessons that you learn from having to navigate in those spaces where you are the other in multiple of your diversity characteristics. So thank you for sharing that. So tell me then, you're in Connecticut, do high school. Tell me about college, law school, and then your career path. What happened?
Sure. So, it's funny. My family would always say, like, I knew from a really young age, like 5 or 6, that I wanted to be a lawyer. And they were always like perplexed, right? Because we didn't have any lawyers in our family. No one else had gone to college at that point or law school, so they didn't know where this was coming from, but it was something that I declared, if you will, at a really young age. And that was the only thing I ever thought about doing. And so I went to Wesleyan undergrad in Connecticut. And in part because I wanted to be away from home, but not really far from home. So it was about, an hour or so away from where I grew up. And allowed me to live on campus and get the real college experience. But also if I needed, my dad to help me with my car, or I needed, some groceries or something, I could always call home. And then went from there. I took a year off and just worked in a law firm in New York, down on Wall Street. I knew what I wanted to do, but I wanted to take my time and study for the LSAT and that sort of thing. So I did that, went to Harvard Law School, which was an incredible experience for a number of reasons. I had, the opportunity to learn from lots of incredible people, but also went to school with some pretty important, incredible people. And then,
anybody we know?
Yes. So obviously Barack was, this is what I say all the time. So Barack was a year ahead of me in law school, but he's way older than me in years of age, just to be clear. So
got it.
So, but yeah, I went to law school, then went to a law firm in Connecticut, one of the largest law firms in Connecticut. Did that for about 5 years. Felt like I wanted to go to a New York law firm to get more sophisticated work. And what I learned there was that the work was more sophisticated and interesting, but I wasn't actually getting it because I was an associate, right? So that goes to the partners. Whereas at the smaller firm, I was doing my own depositions, I was second chair on cases. So, it was really scale and all relative. So I'm at this, New York law firm, but I'm not really getting the great juicy work because I'm only an associate. And it was around that time my husband and I were talking about, having children. And back then, now this is like 1997, right? Back then, you thought that you would go in-house if you wanted to have a family because you didn't want to work weekends and you didn't want to work late evenings and you were going to have a life, right? So it was like this idea of you're giving up some of the intellectual stimulation and money, and the trade-off was that you were going to have a life, right? So none of that's true.
I was going to say
it's true. I mean, I would say, the compensation can be good. The weekends you work, the evenings you work, and, the work is extremely challenging and stimulating. So it was fake news, by the way, but but I believed it at the time. And I got a call about a role at Merck. And I went to Merck, and Ken Frazier was my general counsel.
Wow.
And
wow.
And I just I had the bug. I had been a litigator in private practice. And the nice thing about the Merck job was, one, you didn't have to have any prior experience with like FDA regulatory law. You didn't have to have prior in-house experience. But then I also was going to be learning FDA regulatory law, but also I still got to do litigation for my products. And I loved litigation. And so for me, it was like it was a perfect role. And that really started my in-house career. And I have been in healthcare following that. I was in healthcare for 24 years before coming to McDonald's 3.5 years ago.
So, love this. I have to give you a side story about Ken Frazier. I went to go see The Wiz on Broadway.
Yeah.
And I was with a group of people, and I walked past Ken Frazier, but I was like, I know this man from someplace. And I'm like racking my brain. I meet a lot of people. So I'm like, who's this guy? So I moonwalked. I didn't turn around. And I was like, don't I know you? And he's like, do you? And I was like, I know that I know you. Who are you again? And he must have thought who is this crazy lady? And then I was like, oh my God, you're Ken Frazier. Meanwhile, his wife is looking like she's about to attack me. Like she was like his security. It was just hilarious because he was like, I know that I know your face and I don't forget faces, but we like had this moment where I turned into an ultimate fangirl and was just like, can we take a selfie? He was so kind and wonderful. But that's my Ken Frazier, Crazy Girl Paula story. Side note, he is absolutely wonderful. And I was just like, he's so excited to have a chance to talk to him for a little bit.
He's great. And I will tell you, I think his wife must be used to it. I'll just share briefly one of mine. I saw him not that long ago. I'm in Bermuda. I look across the beach and Ken and his family are there. And I had to interrupt their vacation and, say hi. And, his wife again probably was like, here we go again. But she was so gracious and he's awesome. He always takes time for people. But yeah, I was very, very fortunate to start my in-house career working for him.
I can imagine how much you've learned in terms of that as your starting point. And you've had the opportunity to lead in some big brands. And I mean, I don't know anybody again, I'm a fangirl, so this is what I do. But there are two brands that I talk about, three consistently. One is Beyonce because she's a brand. The other one is Coca-Cola because it's Coca-Cola, and McDonald's. And then it's the biggest global brand, right? And so when I think about branding and how it aligns with, your brand aligns with something else, it's exciting. And it also is, in my mind, a bit overwhelming, right? Because it's like, this is a huge brand. How was it for you when you decided to take that role and like step into Hamburger University that first day?
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I'll just say, like, I was not looking for this role. I got a call about it. I said, yeah, I'm not interested. I'm happy where I am. And, the person that called me was like, yeah, no. The CEO wants to talk to you. And basically, what she said was, he's important. You're not. You're going to talk to him because he specifically asked about you. So I met with him and I didn't really pay attention, honestly, to McDonald's news a lot, to be honest. I was in healthcare and kind of a little bit in my own world. But the more I talked to Chris, my CEO, the more I realized that not only did McDonald's values line up with mine, but his values lined up with mine. You know, what he wanted in a GC was consistent with what I wanted to be for a CEO, you know, and for a company. And honestly, Paula, it was only after I got here. So when I made the decision to come here, you know, I thought, listen, the things I really care about, things like diversity, things like, you know, developing people, those sorts of things on a McDonald's scale is very different than what I can do here. And at the time I was at Boston Scientific.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. I was doing some wonderful things in those areas, but just the scale and the impact I knew was going to be very different. I totally underestimated it though. And I've said this in a couple of times, and I know people have heard it before, but I've said, you know, when I came in, I sort of came in like a snob. I was sort of like, listen, this is burgers and fries. I've been in healthcare. How hard can this be? Right. I'm saving lives. I'm, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact that this brand has is like nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
The legal issues are like nothing I've ever had to deal with before, you know, whether it's things like, you know, pulling out of Russia or having, you know, looking at navigating the conflict between, you know, Israel and Palestine, or, you know, a proxy fight with Carl Icahn, which is the first of its kind in an ESG space, right? So whatever the issue, people tend to want to make McDonald's the example. And that's something I totally underestimated. I didn't realize it. And, you know, a lot of times I'll tease my team and I'll say, how come we never talk about burgers and fries? Because the issues are so big and so significant. And, you know, there is something to be said to be able to say, you know what, this is what we're going to do. And it means something. And to also be able to call my friend Monica at Coke, or, you know, or Nike or Pepsi or other companies and say, this is what we're going to do. You know, this is what we'd like you guys to do, or what are you guys going to do? Or let's talk about it. You know, what do we think makes the most sense? Like, it's a room where not everybody can be in, and just, I feel very, very blessed and fortunate to be able to play in this role.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, like it's the brand. When you think about the things that we are exposed to as being myopic Americans, but obviously McDonald's is everywhere, but it is like the first brand that you really know,
Yeah.
like when you're a kid, and then continues to shift your whole experience. And I recall the first time I got to go to Europe, and I was in Paris, and I was like, wait, so they have McDonald's. It was very overwhelming to understand that this brand is everywhere you go, and people understand. They see the arches. Even today, when I was like, "What am I going to wear?" I was like, "I have to wear something with yellow." The fact that it's such a wonderful brand thing, and I think it elevates everyone in it in terms of the affiliation, and also makes the expectation a big one, because you, like, to your point, you're setting policy in a lot of places and trends, which is what strong brands do. So talk to me about some of the other things that you've done that it's not work, but still leadership and volunteerism, and how that has helped you to sort of build your brand.
Yeah. So, you know, I think service is a huge part of really, you know, of who I am. And so, you know, whether it's through church, whether it's through my sorority, whether it's through, you know, any other kind of community service opportunities, it's a huge part of who I am. And it's again, it's part of, I think, where it shows up in kind of how I describe myself, almost in all areas, but certainly integrity, right? Having this high sense of doing the right thing and purpose, and, you know, realizing that I think everything that I have, I was, you know, blessed to receive. And it doesn't mean that I didn't work hard for it. Doesn't mean I don't think I deserve it. But I also think there's a lot of other people that are deserving. And so, you know, there's a big part of me that feels like I need to use what I've been given, and not even just, you know, financial, even just knowledge and experiences to other people. So one of the programs that, and again, it's in all aspects. Let me say one other thing. I'm on the board of Dick's Sporting Goods, and even that, that sports matters, right? Sports for so many people is how they learn so many life skills, whether it's teamwork and leadership and the ability to lose gracefully, the ability to win gracefully, right? Not all adults know that today, right? Just saying,
Some
right?
people still need to go back there and learn.
Exactly. So like even, in sort of the things that resonate with me and kind of where I try to put myself, it's in those places where there's a shared value with who I am and with my brand. So one of the things that I'm most proud of is there is a group of 19 Black and Brown executives, of which I am one, that started a foundation in Boston. And this was following the murder of George Floyd. And I think, like many people, I was thinking, and we were thinking, like, this isn't really why, personally, this was not why I went into the law to work for, these big corporations. Like when I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, it was because I wanted to help the underdog, right? I wanted to help people that looked like me that were, not getting a fair shake. And I wanted to help the George Floyds of the world, right? And I sort of just went into this, am I really using my talents in the way that I'm supposed to be using them? There were other individuals that were feeling the same way. And we got together and really realized that we have political and financial clout and could pool our money and our resources and get our companies to invest, that we could invest and really do something for Brown and Black communities that would be impactful. And that's what we did. We started this foundation that provides money to nonprofits. And, sometimes these nonprofits, when organizations look to give money to nonprofits, they have certain metrics and standards. And a lot of nonprofits that are doing great work in these communities just can't meet those metrics and standards. They could meet different ones, but we tend to sort of cookie cut what good looks like. And we wanted to make sure that we were providing resources in communities that really needed them, in areas that really needed them, whether it was education or healthcare or other, specific areas, in a way that would impact the communities that we lived in the Massachusetts area.
I love that. I'm also on a foundation board in Boston as well. It's a family foundation, of which I'm not a family member, although I am now. But one of the reasons why I wanted to participate, and this is somebody who I went to boarding school with, who said, can you come on and help us to literally shake up what we do, was because I understood that there were so many, to your point, barriers to access for folks who are doing good work that don't really, they are standards, but they don't necessarily make sense. And they're sometimes like preventing the good that they want to do because of the standards that they have. And so I am excited to have that as an opportunity. But one of the things you said at the beginning of your talking about this experience was you collaborated, you got with other folks. And it's something I try to explain to people. Your squad, whoever they are, is a huge part of your brand. What you can do, opportunities you can get, things that you learn, all of those things are that board of directors, those folks who are helping to shift the world with you and really will tell you the truth and give you things to work on, et cetera. It's such a big part of your brand. And I'm really glad that you said that you all came together and said, what can we all do? More people need to think about who surrounds them and how they can help impact the world because of that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And it was such an important time because, first of all, like I had gone to law school in Boston. I didn't even know all of these individuals. I didn't even know we had that much. I'm like, you're the GC here. Oh, you're the president of this bank. You're this. Like, we didn't even know that we all existed. Like many of us knew some of us, but nobody knew like everybody. And then to kind of realize we were all feeling the same way. And then realizing we could actually have an impact here, right? We can, I think we could individually, but what you could do collectively is even more significant. And so it was a really important time, and for us, for me personally, and for us, I would say. And now the foundation is thriving.
Fantastic. It reminds me of the conversation that I had with Lori Robinson Hayden, talking about how she started CCWC and just kind of getting folks together who all had the same challenges and putting that list together. And I know that you are going to be at CCWC.
I am. I am.
Very excited to see you there and glad that you were getting recognition. And it made me think of this as a thing. Sometimes folks love recognition. They love getting awards, etc. We don't know each other well, but we know each other.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, what do those things mean to you in terms of, because I know that sometimes you get to a level and people are like, here's every award that exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
But are there some things that mean more to you? Are there things that you'd rather the work that you do? Like, what are your thoughts around being acknowledged in those ways?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I never pay for recognition. So there are some recognitions where, I get lots of, stuff in my inbox, we want to feature you as the most blah, blah, blah on the cover of blah, blah, blah. And it's only going to cost you $1,500 type thing. We don't pay for any recognitions at all. And so, when you see me being recognized for something, it's unsolicited, and it's not paid for. And that means, it does mean a lot to me. It means a lot to me because you don't always know that what you're doing quietly has an impact loudly.
Yes.
And, we don't do it for the recognition. I don't do it for the recognition. But it's nice when someone says, you know what, I see you.
Mm-hmm.
I see you. I see what you're doing. I feel so honored to be getting this Diamond Award from CCWC because first I'll say, I remember the first couple of years, people would always say to me, are you going to CCWC? And I would say no. And I felt like, one, I didn't really know about it. And then two, I felt like I was far in my career and like, what's the benefit, right? For me, honestly, That's how I felt. And then the first time I went, I was like, I cannot believe I've been missing this all these years. If for no other reason than to be in a room of 1,500 women that look like you and have shared experiences. If nothing else, when you're in that boardroom and you're the only one, you remember, like, this might feel lonely, but I am not alone, right? I am not alone because I just left 1,500 women who are in the same place with me, rooting for me, cheering for me, struggling with me, dealing with the same things. And so to get an award from that organization, it means a lot to me. I'm very excited about it.
I'm excited about it for you as well. I'll be the one yelling outside, like, what is it? It's a powerful, you explained it really well, but it's like palpable when you're there about the power of women of color when we come together collectively to do anything, but specifically to talk about our experiences as lawyers and women in the law. It really is a don't miss. And I'm excited that it's 20 years of fabulousness. Another question that just came to my mind when you said about, you being seen, it reminded me of something somebody else said to me. It was Sabrina at Starbucks, and when she was on the podcast, she talked about not really being seen at work until she had a mentor or sponsor to show her how to show up and to sort of be out there and show her value and not to be shy about it. Have you had significant mentoring in terms of the work and places that you've been? And you talked about Ken, and what are some of the things that you've learned about yourself and your brand and building your brand from mentors that you've had?
Yeah. It's interesting. So I've definitely had mentors. I consider Ken one of my mentors for sure. There was a woman who was the CEO of Avon, Sherry McCoy, who I consider a mentor, and they serve very specific purposes for me at different times in my life and in my career. I'd look at Ken and think about, similar to me, first in his family to to do what he did, right? Harvard Law School, and trying to navigate a world that's, that's different from the world that he knew and grew up in, and did it with such integrity and grace. And so certainly, was, and I would say still is, even though I haven't talked to him in some time, but I will always consider him to be, a mentor. Sherry, interesting because she had 3 sons and worked her way up the corporate ladder at Johnson and Johnson, dealt with, I would say, a professional disappointment when she didn't get a certain, CEO role and someone else did. And again, watched her pivot and handle that with grace, but really looked up to her in terms of, how do I navigate being a mother and being there, but also being a professional, because that's so important to who I am and actually makes me a better mother. So I've definitely had mentors that I've looked up to, that I've tried to emulate, leaders that I look to, sometimes leaders that I would look to and say, okay, that's not what I want to be.
Right. Yes, understood there.
Yeah. So really important to me. I will tell you, one of the most significant lessons for me, or opportunities for me, came when I was at Johnson and Johnson. We were in a situation where it was like a real crisis situation. This was around 2010, I guess, and a real crisis situation with our facilities and some of our products, Tylenol and Motrin and Pepcid, those products. And it actually ended up resulting in the shutdown of our facility, a consent decree, congressional hearings, shareholder derivative suits. It was ugly, right? But one of the lessons that I learned during that was, my boss never said to me, like, this is too big or too important to the J&J brand. I think I need to take this over, or, you need help, you can't do it yourself, or anything like that. And there were days, literally, I'd walk in the office and I didn't know if I was supposed to be like HR that day, quality that day. I would come in and they would say, you need to talk to FDA, you and the head of quality need to talk to FDA, or you need to be in the board room because the board wants to talk to you. And it was the most exciting time for me because, I always say it was a nightmare for the company, but it's a lawyer's dream, right? With all these issues. But it taught me so much. It taught me about enterprise leadership and how to be more than just a lawyer. But it also taught me the importance of, you let people do it. And, either they rise to the occasion or they don't. And, they let me do it. And it was a pivotal turn in my career journey, if you will, because it opened lots of doors. And then sponsors came, right, from inside the company, and wanted to know, what did I want to do next? Where was I going to go next? How could they promote me? And it's one of the things that I think people just need, is they just need an opportunity, and you let them shine and you recognize them for that. And they tend to show up.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, gosh, number one, I wish I had worked for a leader such as you. Just even saying those things, because to your point about bad bosses, I've had way too many experiences with those, but just people who lead without giving that agency. And I think you don't get to learn and grow and even make mistakes, right? Like it's people act as if mistakes are things that you can't get over. Yeah, they may be challenging in the meantime, but I do think that mistakes are what also helps us build resilience, and what we learn from that helps us build our brand, right? So like you said, that probably was wild. I was sitting there getting anxious when you were talking about what was happening. But again, you're talking about it from a place of, I did that.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to it did me. Like I'm no longer right. It builds us. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'm like, I'm strong enough, but I'm good. But those things, they do build you. They do build you.
They do.
So one of the questions I had was about a challenge that you had, but you just talked about it.
Yeah. And I think I built that. And also someone gave me the space to build that. Because too often I think in corporate America, there's a lot of like, oh, this is really important, I'm going to do it. This is really important, I need the shine. Yeah. Like, but someone believed, gave me the opportunity, believed I could do it, and let me do it. They were comfortable enough with themselves to let me do it.
Which is that's a real boss move, right? When you're
Yes,
like, look how good of a leader I am, that everybody's shining.
that's right. That's right.
So speaking of boss moves, you have been recognized as one of the most powerful women in corporate America. Let's just take a minute. Okay. What do you like? How do you balance being authentic and still visible? Like we kind of talked about the big brand, but one of the most powerful women in corporate, that's a huge thing. So everyone, I was talking to Carla Harris and I was like, you're on a Fortune 1 company. Like, how do you even wrap that around your head? It's that same sort of thing. How do you balance authenticity and that visibility that comes with the role and that recognition?
I think that recognition comes in part because of the authenticity, to be honest. I don't think that I would be nearly as successful or be able to kind of really connect with people if I was pretending to be something, that I wasn't. So I think in part that's where that comes from. I don't think about it. Well, and let me just say about the authenticity. I mean, listen, I say this all the time. What you get is the real Desiree, but you will not see the Saturday night Desiree, right? And so, people sometimes when they're like, yeah, your authentic self, well, you don't need to bring all yourself to work, right? There's some of myself that is reserved for like my family, my very, very close friends. And that's that. So, I think authenticity, but I think also sort of balancing that with, the appropriateness of, the forum and the environment, but I also just think, I don't really think about it. Like I don't do anything because of the reward or the recognition or the visibility. And I think, where maybe I've seen people sort of trip up is when they're so focused on personal branding that becomes what they're focused on. I think I was first, I am first, and then my brand sort of has followed, as opposed to, and maybe this is the wrong way to do it, you should tell me, but as opposed to like, this is the brand and now I'm gonna follow that. It sort of has followed me. And I think that having that strong upbringing, strong sense of faith, a feeling of who I am and knowing who I am and what I'm capable of doing, all of that, that's my authentic self. And I don't really think about the lists or the recognition. I actually, until you said that, I didn't even remember I was on a list like that.
Well, I love that. I will take the shine and think about it for you. I'll be like, did you know that? It's I think I have received awards and it's always for me like, okay, well, what does this mean? Like of course I think I love stuff, right? I'm like, yeah, this is great. But then it's like, so what does it mean? And whether it's because I'm a child of immigrants or first and all of the things in my family, I don't know, but I'm always like, it means I got to do more. Like my business tagline is engage your hustle. It's like, what's going to be next? What's going to be next? Because I'm always thinking about legacy, right? And, having lost my mom at a young age, I always think about the things that she didn't get to do or the things that she would have wanted me to do. Like I said, being the wind of the leaf. And so those are kind of like a tie-in, like, okay, good, I'm hitting the point that my mom would have liked, right? It would have been helpful. But to your point, I'm not doing it for those things. And I'm like surprised, like me? And I'm like, okay, yeah, me.
Yeah.
And, but your question about what comes first is like your vision of the brand or you being it, it's a mindset. It's when those two things come together, right? The excellence that you talked about, and then the strategies and the decisions that you make, all of those things kind of put in together. That's what makes a strong brand. But when you are working on it, I think you should have a vision first. And so, all my listeners always know I'm always talking about intention when it comes to branding, because that's being the wind as opposed to being the leaf, right? Like you might get there, but I want you to think about where you want to go, because then you can be, tomorrow's not promised. I'm like, what are we going to do today? Let's figure this out so we can get to and always to a good goal, right? Always to making the world better, making our situations better, making situations better for everybody. And the future is important.
Yep.
So,
and you know what else I loved about what you just said? I love that, and I'm sure this is common, like when you've lost someone that's close to you, a part of that driver is continuing to want to make them proud. I mean, I know my mom's looking, watching me, and, even though I'd rather have her here telling me she's proud of me, like it's part of the driver of like, is this something that she would approve of? Is this something that would make her proud? Is this something that reflects the legacy, her legacy?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Is it doing the good she talked about? And
That's
knowing
right.
Yes, absolutely. So tell me, do you have any advice for people who are trying to build their brands?
I mean, it's kind of a little bit how I think about weight loss, right? It takes a long time to to establish your brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be lost like that, right? Weight loss is the opposite, right? It comes on really quickly, but it can take forever to come off. But I do think, it's really important to, to sort of be who you want people to know you as,
Mm-hmm.
and to reflect that in your behavior, your decisions, your speech, your activities, your focus. A lot of times, and this happened to me, someone was already talking to others about me before they even reached out to me to say, we'd like you to think about this job. They had already talked to, other people who had interacted with me in my career, people that they knew, people that I knew. That's your brand, right? That's your brand when you don't even know. Conversations are happening right now. Conversations right now could be happening about you. And what are those people saying about you? And you want it to be positive. You don't want it to be like, oh, this person's angry, or this person doesn't have an open mind, or, not sure about whether they're the most ethical person.
Mm-hmm.
What you want to be and to be known for is how you have to show up at every single time, and just assume that somebody is evaluating you, somebody is watching you, and then someone is having a conversation about you and about that interaction. I save my frustrations for certain people, for that safe space, right? And it's not at work, it's with, my husband, it's with my brother, it's with my closest friends and family. But that's where, if I have to say a bad word, or if I have to express frustration, or something that I don't want to be known for in the professional world, that's where I can let that out. But in the professional space, I always try to remember, reflect who you want to be known as, and embody that in all aspects of what you do and say.
I love that. We'll save all of those other things for Saturday night, Desiree.
That's right. That's right. After a couple cocktails, it's on.
Exactly. So speaking of, and maybe not, what do you do for fun?
I don't know. Fun. That's a good question. I love to read. I know some people would say that's not fun. I love to work out. I do. I love the gym.
Some people would say that's not fun too.
I know it's not to some people, but I do. I love the gym. I love to shop. Friday night. So I didn't say Friday night, Desiree. I said Saturday night, Desiree. But Friday night, Desiree usually has like a glass of wine and internet shopping. And I get lots of cool stuff. I wake up Saturday, I'm like, what the heck did I buy? I get lots of cool stuff the following week, and then I send it back to the store. That's all fun to me.
There we are. That's where we're aligned right there. I'm like, oh, what can I get today? Yeah, it's the return piece I need to work on.
Yeah.
So I asked the same two questions of each of my guests, and one is this: what is one aspect of your brand, I call it stand by your brand, that you will never compromise on?
Integrity. Mm-hmm. I will never, not do the right thing. I want to make my, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to embarrass my family. I want my children to be proud of me, and I have in the corporate environment, I've been asked to do things that did not sit well with me.
Mhm.
And I refused to do it. But in my mind, for sure, it was either that person has to go or I have to go.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So it's not something I could ever compromise on.
Love that. So the second question is this. So branding room only is a play on standing room only because I'm clever. And so I want you to talk to me about what is something about you, something that the experience about you, some magic that you have that people would be in a room where there'd be only standing room in order to experience about you.
I think it's honestly the authentic conversation.
Mhm.
I mean, listen, I'm not afraid to sort of share my vulnerable self, right? I feel more, and I will say this to my team a lot, I feel more like them than I do like me. I remember climbing up the corporate ladder. I remember the fears. I remember being a working mother and being afraid that my kids were going to be sitting on the front stoop because I was late to daycare, for picking them up. I remember, not feeling like my boss was including me in the conversation. I remember not being sure about, like, what do I pack for this business trip? Right.
Mhm.
Like, I think that people really connect with the fact that I see them because I was them. And I'm still them in some respects. I've certainly had a successful professional career, but I'm vulnerable enough to share my fears, my stories, my challenges, my history, my hopes, and do it in a way that lets them know, one, I'm willing and able to help them in any way I can, even if it's like, this is how I navigated this, right?
Right.
It may be right for you, it may not be right for you, but this is how I did it. There were a couple times when I moved for bigger opportunities and my family couldn't move at the time because, well, they could have, but my husband and I decided the kids were in school. Let's let them finish out the school year. Those were some of the most difficult times of my life, being away from my kids for, and commuting on the weekends and that sort of thing. It's not for everybody, but I'm very comfortable sharing some of those stories about how I felt and how sad I was and how I would think about, am I a terrible mother because I'm putting this before them because I'm coming home, Thursday through Sunday, but you know, all of that. I don't know that I've done it right. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I'm certainly willing to share what I've learned. And I think people gravitate towards that. I think they come into a room to hear it because either they do something differently or they want to see how I did it, and they feel seen. They feel seen.
I love that. Well, I'm so happy that you had a chance to um, tell your story on my podcast and being in the branding room. I appreciate your authenticity and your vulnerability and your integrity in the conversation. And you, whatever you want to talk, you feel free to call and we'll talk as much as you want, anytime
Okay.
you want. And I look forward to seeing you get your reward at CCWC. And I'm going to see you soon anyway. So
You are
thanks for being in the branding room. Thanks,
great.
Desiree.
Thank you, Paula. Thanks for having me.